Are you looking to take the next step toward investing in commercial real estate but don't know where to go? CRE Central offers a comprehensive education and coaching platform designed to help you get started. Our online courses cover a wide range of topics, from the fundamentals to advanced strategies, ensuring you have the knowledge and skills needed to thrive in this competitive industry. As a member, you'll gain access to our exclusive online community and monthly group coaching calls, providing you with valuable networking opportunities and personalized guidance from experienced professionals. Whether you're a beginner or looking to take your career to the next level, CRE Central has the resources you need. Visit www.crecentral.com to learn more. Welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast. We are live from the Cobble Group studio here in Nashville, Tennessee. And today, we're going to be diving into a really interesting story on a major asset that has finally been listed for sale. It's one of those properties that I believe every single mayor in my lifetime here in Nashville has said they were going to do something about this, and it's never happened. It's the Icahn owned PSC Metals 45-acre site, give or take, down by the Titan Stadium, almost right next to downtown Nashville. I mean, in my opinion, and I'm sure you guys are going to jump in with some comments on what you might disagree with me on this one on. I think it's the biggest urban redevelopment opportunity, if not one of the biggest urban redevelopment opportunities in the United States at this time. It's a really big deal. Really excited to see this one going to auction. And of course, we're joined by none other than Nathan Weinberg, good friend of mine. He's been involved in real estate in Nashville for a long time, a real estate developer in East Nashville, which is this side of town where this property is. And he's very involved civically. So I couldn't think of anybody better to have this discussion with than you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for being
Excited to be
here.
Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be a fun one.
I'm pumped about it.
I was already learning more about this, and I've lived here my entire life, and you were already educating me on what has been going on. Catch us up. What is this? What is this site?
So this site sits on the Cumberland River, which is directly across from downtown Nashville. And adjacent to the existing and the new Titan Stadium, and the redevelopment project associated with that, which is the East Bank. And what has existed here since I've lived here and since people like you have been alive here has been a scrap metal recycling facility. And it has had many different names over the years because the property has been leased from a single owner for quite some time. And it's changed hands a couple times over the years, but most recently it changed hands when Carl Icahn bought it. And I was telling you before we started here, Icahn's an interesting guy because he is, I'm going to date myself. He's Richard Gere from Pretty Woman.
Yeah, so Nathan used this analogy before we went live, and I was like, I've actually never seen that movie.
but not that suave. Like he's not, I don't think he's that good looking either. So his whole investment strategy, not his whole, part of his investment strategy has been to buy companies and strip mine them. Basically go into them, take out the parts that have value, sell off the pieces that don't. And what happens inevitably with that is companies go bankrupt and blight occurs in different locations. I'm not saying this is a dig on Carl Icahn because I don't need a billionaire coming after me. But I think it's been an interesting investment strategy that emerged sort of in the early 80s. In fact, Danny DeVito did a movie about it. This is a good one. It's called
Dating Yourself Again.
I know. It's called Other People's Money. And it follows an investor kind of like this. Anyways, he bought this thing, and I don't think that anybody really was paying much attention. I know I really wasn't. I mean, this happened while I was here, and he bought the company. He didn't buy the land. The land had been leased for ages from a single owner, and the lease was these 45 acres plus or minus, and Carl bought the company that owned it, PSC Metals. And I think a lot of people looked at him sort of like, what are you doing getting into scrap metal? There's nothing to spin off from this. There's nothing to mine from this. It's already, it literally is the refuse.
It is what it is.
It is from mining something. And so what people didn't see was this is like the best chess real estate play of all time. It's like, I'm going to buy this company. I know the term of these leases. And I know that when the leases come up for renewal, there's only a single use case for the property. And I've got it. And the companies that might be willing to sign a lease like this in this location aren't located nearby right now. And so I'm going to use that as leverage to buy the property. So he did. He bought it. I think the price tag was about $25 million, which is mind-blowing.
It's so cheap. It's cheap even back then.
So cheap.
But I mean, it
even back
makes
then.
sense because so many people are scared about environmental concerns.
Yeah, which we're going to, and that still exists, by the way. But then Oracle comes to Nashville in what, 2020, 2021, and says, we're going to invest on the other side of Titan Stadium. We're going to spend, what is it, $254 million.
It's a lot of money.
On 60 acres. 60 acres. And in addition to that, because they spelled it, they gave us the blueprint of this whole thing, by the way. So, spoiler alert, I'm telling you how this all thing ends. For $254 million 3 years ago, Oracle bought this piece of property that was in similar condition. It was an industrial use, so it has oil and gas storage on it, has metal storage on it, those sorts of things. And it's multiple parcels broken into odd places. The grade is such that it sits in the floodplain, all of these things. And they said, all right, we don't have any problem spending $254 million. In addition to that, we're going to pledge $170 million in public infrastructure improvements, including a new pedestrian bridge across from East Nashville into downtown. It's self-serving, but who cares? Like, it's a great public good. And we're also committed to cleaning up the site. They didn't put a price tag on the cleanup, but we know that the terms of the deal were such that they at least needed to spend $254 million on the property and another $170 million on public investments. That's before we get to cleanup. And so we can do the calculations on stuff like this. And that puts the price tag on those 60 parcels or 60 acres, I got to think, close to $500 million. And that's 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So what has happened in the real estate market in the last 4 years? It's been really bad, right? It just took,
Yeah, it's only kind of gone up in Nashville. I mean, that's the thing. Like, even back in 2008 or 2009, the height of the economic crisis, Nashville still went up 1% in real estate values.
Yeah.
At the height of the great financial crisis.
Yeah.
So there's no telling how much real estate, especially in that area, has gone up since then, because Nashville is still an incredibly safe investment for a lot of real estate investors.
Yeah. And, it is, we're talking about waterfront. So it's not, we're not talking about landlocked parcels what's interesting about this is this piece of property actually mostly is landlocked, but it has adjacency and it has a single parcel that is waterfront. So we get to call it waterfront. And so waterfront property anywhere, I don't care where it is, anywhere in the United States, does not depreciate at the same rate.
That's
and
right.
it also doesn't appreciate at the same rate. The delta is massive.
Disproportionate.
Yeah.
And for those of you all that are listening on the podcast, you're not joining us live on YouTube, we do have a map pulled up showing how close this parcel is to downtown. I mean, you're literally across the street from the Titan Stadium, right? You're on the river, which just across the river from this site is Pinewood Social, right? Just so that everybody kind of gets an idea of where we are. To the east, it's bordered by the interstate, and to the west, you've got Korean Veterans Boulevard bridge.
And all of that, you can already start to see the makings of it. Cumberland Park was the first move by Nashville to start redeveloping the riverfront.
Yep.
And the Titan Stadium is the next set. So Titan Stadium, where it sits right now, is going to move back where its parking lot is in that image. And the front part does not get replaced by parking lots. It gets replaced by redevelopment and park settings along the river. And so what is happening is ultimately a continuous greenway that will extend, I think it's 40 miles of Greenway.
It's a lot of Greenway.
It's a ton.
They've been working on that. I mean, Mark Deutschman has really helped lead the charge in the Nashville Greenways. But man, let me see if I can find something on the Greenways while you're talking about that.
Yeah, and so in fact, I was at a ribbon cutting for the reopening of the Greenway by Sound Stadium this last week. I was going to do a shameless plug for one of my coffee shops, but I'm not going to do it.
Go for it. No, everybody knows I hang out at Retrograde all the time.
Retrograde Coffee over by the Sound Stadium.
You get plugged here like every single episode anyway.
But this Greenway is massive. I'm really curious. I'm probably exaggerating the total length of it, but it's huge. It runs all the way from Donaldson all the way into North Nashville. And what they have created by doing this Nissan Stadium is starting to fill in these little gaps that existed in the Greenway.
That's right. So you can see here it stops basically at Riverfront Park over by Nissan Stadium, and then it stops over in Shelby Park before you kind of get into East Nashville, and they're planning on connecting those two stops, which means you can basically go from, North Nashville all the way to Hermitage, Donaldson without ever getting off of the Greenway.
Yeah, it's huge. It's not 40 miles, but it is every bit of 25 or 30.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Easy.
And so, what they've been what Metro wants to do without spending its own money is start connecting these pieces. And that is only of tremendous benefit to the city. The Envision East Bank stuff that finally came to fruition with the Titan Stadium happening, it's finally happening. That has been talked about since before I moved here. And East Nashville in particular stands to benefit the most from this. It's huge.
Oh, 100%.
And what we are always looking for are how do we preserve and protect and then promote waterfront opportunities in our cities. And Nashville has done a particularly bad job of this over the years. And I think, we can learn some great lessons from cities like Pittsburgh, like Cleveland. In the late 70s, early 80s, the river in Cleveland caught fire. That's how dirty it was.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
And now it's one of the prettiest spaces in the country. It's a monument to industrial sort of redevelopment of sites. And so we have the opportunity to do something like that here, and it's exciting.
I think Pittsburgh is the right city to compare it to as well, because the comparison that I always hear is Chicago. And that's not fair, right? Because I know that Chicago has really gone all in on its waterfront. Chicago's flat. It's relatively easy for you to build massive towers along the riverfront there, whereas in Nashville, we've got some pretty serious terrain. I mean, there's points where it's 80 to 100 feet down to the water. Yeah. Right? So it's tough to really develop greenways on that. Agreed. Because it's so expensive. I mean, when you first heard about this, this is a deal that we've all been thinking about for our entire real estate careers, because it's really interesting to think through the implications of what could happen. What were your initial thoughts?
Oh my God. To be clear, it still might not happen.
That's right.
Like, it's going to auction, which, by the way, is the exact right venue for it. The problem is that you nailed it. This is probably presently is the largest land redevelopment opportunity in the country. I won't say the world because I don't know enough about the world to know that that's true, but it's massive. And so you got to. What's great about this is we probably in the hour that we're here could sit and make a list of the people that can buy this.
Yeah, I was gonna say. There's 10.
Right, exactly. There's 10 people. Yeah. It's hedge funds, right? It's hedge funds and pension funds that could do this. It is maybe a foreign investment house, though I'd be very surprised if it was allowed. I don't know the legalities of it. I don't think a single wealthy individual wants this. I don't think it's right for them. It is some other kind of REIT that exists out there, but that REIT would have to be so well capitalized, and they'd have to be willing to let their entire board of directors turn in a single vote, because that's exactly what would happen. So, it's a tiny list. It's a Goldman Sachs, right? It's somebody coming in with the best purse string.
It's a Hudson Yards type of development. Obviously not that scale, but it's pretty big.
And Amazon's already here. So, it's not Amazon.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not Oracle.
It's not Oracle. So, boom, gone. Is it Facebook? Is it Meta?
Be interesting.
It would be interesting. I can't imagine, Meta just laid off a ton of people.
Twitter can't afford it, or X.
X, whatever. Yeah, they can't afford it. And it's not really suitable for something like that.
Mm-hmm.
This site has the strings that are going to be attached to the redevelopment of this are going to be they're going to be really burdensome. So it has to be somebody who am I allowed to swear on this thing?
Yeah, I don't care.
It has to be an organization or a person that has fuck you money.
Yeah,
because they just can't care.
Well, it has to be, and it's got to be somebody that, because I mean, that no matter what they want to do, they're going to have to work with the city of Nashville
and the federal government.
That's right.
Yeah,
which means that it's going to have to be somebody that the city of Nashville and the federal government want to work with.
That's right.
Right, because otherwise, there's no point in buying it.
I think that's exactly right. It will be remarkable, the terms of the deal. So Metro,
walk us through that. What do you think the terms of the deal are going to be?
Well, the zoning right now is not permissive for the ultimate end use, right? So it has to go through a rezoning process. That's Metro's golden ticket, right? That's them able to say,
they get to hang on.
Right. We'll sign whatever you want, but you have to do ABC through Z. And ABC through Z, by the way, is complete the Greenway, provide flood mitigation along the Cumberland River, provide public benefit in some meaningful way outside of the Greenway. So that's going to be parks. And it's going to have to have some affordable housing component. It's got to have
like that's like a non-starter.
It's got to have it.
Yeah.
Got to have it, right? And so what will happen is any developer worth their salt is going to say, oh, I can't hem and haw about it, right? But we know that whoever's buying this really doesn't get to hem and haw because they don't care. And so they're going to say yes to all of those things because they cannot let it go.
It's a legacy property.
That's
right.
Not cannot let it go. And it's going to become vertical mixed use because it's going to be so damn expensive that you cannot do townhouses. Can't do it.
No, not possible.
No. You got to have density at a vertical scale. And so in addition to that, it's going to have commercial at a vertical scale. It is going to have probably some hospitality component at a vertical scale. So we're talking about another hotel in Nashville. And because it's on the water, it's going to be a brand. Like, I think the Four Seasons probably kicks themselves a little bit because they're like, oh, we could have waited. But they've got a beautiful property, so it's hard to fault them. But this is going to be an auberge. It's going to be...
Well, the Ritz fell through.
Marriott's in trouble right now. They're having some difficulties. I can't imagine them investing money in a Ritz-Carlton here.
You think?
I don't think so. I think I could see Hilton coming in with like a Waldorf brand.
Yeah.
I think that if he wasn't so... God, I'm going to use his name, and I can barely handle it. I think that Trump would love to have something here.
Oh, God.
And so I think that, there's going to be something like that here.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, I think that, the housing cases are going to be tied to MDHA. And so MDHA is going to say it has to be X% affordable or income restricted housing. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to have to be, because you don't want to put people in an isolated setting, it's going to be mixed income. And so you're going to have multiple levels of that. I don't think that Metro is going to ask for any ownership stake in it. I think they learned their lesson on the original Titan Stadium.
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity here. I don't know that it will happen, but I think there's an opportunity here for the Sports Authority to get involved. Originally, when this got announced, I thought this is finally where that baseball stadium will go. But I don't think that that's what this will be.
I think it's going to be way too expensive. I just don't know how you can make... I mean, I get it. You can go back to the city of Nashville and the state of Tennessee and ask for some money to make it happen. But, I think Nashvillians right now have got it about up to here in terms of giving money to sports teams. So
I think that's probably true.
I don't know that that's going to go over.
And
super
Justin
well.
Timberlake got a DUI, so we can't.
Yeah, man, what the hell? Our poster child.
Right.
What do you think it's going to sell for? I mean, if Oracle went for what it did, 60 acres, what do you think this is going to? I mean, just ballpark. I know it's an auction, so who knows?
400
million.
I think maybe. Yeah.
I mean, not a bad price, really.
I
mean, I know it's crazy high. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's
but
a lot of money.
It's also going to cost $200 million, maybe more, to clean it, because it has been filled with heavy metal for 100 years.
Yeah.
And it's on the water. So I cannot, I told Steve, who you've had on this before, I told Steve the other day it's going to be a super fun site. And he said, no,
100%. He didn't think it will be?
I don't know. I mean, the problem is a super fun site means that somebody in the private sector couldn't agree to clean it up. So he's probably right in that it won't be an official super fun site, but I think that it is going to be on the scale of a super fun cleanup.
Oh, yeah.
Which, by the way, if anybody's excited about the project, means that we're 10, 15, 20 years away.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a while.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only a couple of options to do if it is technically a super fun site or if it's as contaminated as everybody thinks it's going to be. One, which is very expensive, you haul off all of the dirt until there's no more metals in the soil, which means that they could be digging for quite some time.
Yeah.
The other option is they basically build an incineration factory on site and then start throwing the soil into it until it's clean. That's also very expensive. You don't really have good options here.
No, it's terrible. Here's the benefit. So the geology of Tennessee works in their favor. The limestone is so shallow here. They could dig down and hit limestone in a hurry. And we know that limestone's on that site because it's elevated. And so it's on a shelf. My stepfather just moved here, and he's a geologist by trade, and I love driving around Nashville with him because he's give you a 100 million year history of Tennessee and what he sees. And I think, it might not take quite as long to clean it up as we think it would, just because of what they're going to hit. But it's going to be expensive. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be something that needs to get cleaned up.
That's funny. I get asked all the time, like, what's the best job that you could have to get started in commercial real estate? I've never thought about that, but geologist is not a bad one.
Massive.
If you understand the soils and how all of that is composed, that's super helpful.
I mean,
you're digging into it. I know plenty of developers that should have had a geology degree and probably did have one by the time they were done with their sites.
So it's really, mining companies, that's who they hire.
Yeah.
We hire civil engineers because we need a project that's going to be work for everything around it, but mining companies hire geologists.
Right.
And those geologists provide these massive reports that will dig. He can tell you exactly how big a glacier was that rolled through this part of town, in what years, what it left behind. It's fascinating.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
If you're joining us live, feel free to jump into the live chat. Let us know your thoughts on the Icahn scrapyard. Let us know what questions you have around what this sale, what this redevelopment could really mean for the Nashville area. Nathan, it's at the doorstep, basically, of East Nashville. Mm-hmm. At least the doorstep to East Nashville from the rest of Nashville, which to us might be as well be the back door.
Right.
We don't care.
We don't.
we don't cross the river anyway. What does something like this mean for East Nashville?
It's a big deal. East Nashville has. So I think let's go back to geography for just a second. So East Nashville exists in the largest geographic block of residential space in all of Nashville. It just that is truth right there. Look at that. It is enormous.
This whole section right here.
So I could put East Nashville on downtown, and it would extend all the way through West End and Green Hills and all of that. And so it is enormous. And that means that it should, on paper, have the same kind of status. It should have the same all of the metrics should be similar to more developed sections of the city. And for decades, it has not. And there's a racial legacy there that exists in North Nashville and East Nashville, and it's the reason that it has been depressed for as long as it has been. But it's now open. It's open for business. And what this site means is that we now will have the final connection points. It's like we're digging a tunnel. We're doing the English Channel, right?
That's right.
And we're right there. We're almost there. This breaks through it. There's a couple of additional sites along the river that we'd love to see trade hands, but they're not consequential in the big picture here. This one is. This is a huge deal. And what it will ultimately mean is, if you zoom in, you can see Casey Homes there. Envision Casey Place is a project that started, and this is an older aerial photo of this. Envision Casey. Well, actually, no. It's just
You've
couple
got
years.
Fifth and Shelby right there. Yeah.
This Envision Casey. So Casey is the largest subsidized housing project in the city. It's huge. You can see it. It's like 15 square blocks, something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
And about 7 years ago, Envision Casey Place was a joint partnership with the state, the city, and MDHA to come in here and change the overall demographics of the space to make it a spot that people could really excel and accelerate their lives and their wealth generationally. What we've seen is 4 of the components or 4 of the phases of Casey have already taken place. And what they really need to be true successes is adjacency to commercial, like low-density commercial space. They need access to groceries. They need access to services like healthcare and whatnot. And what we're starting to see with the Titan Stadium flipping, Oracle moving, you can actually see the earth being moved on the north end of Topgolf there. That's all part of Oracle. But all of this is moving towards supplying that adjacency that Casey Homes needs. And it's really exciting. Bigger picture, though, I've lived in East Nashville for 13 years now. I don't go down to the river unless I'm in Shelby Bottoms Park.
Well, there's no point. I mean, that was the next point that I was going to make is if you look at Davidson Street, which is the last street before the river in East Nashville, it's all industrial.
Terrible.
Everything in this area is industrial, and then there's Casey Homes. And so, of course, like there's been no chance for anything to really develop over here because everything around it doesn't promote anything to be developed that's going to help everything.
That's right. What's so interestingly, Davidson Street. Davidson Street is a little bit of a success story, though, and I'm going to give it a little bit of credit because what Davidson Street is essentially is a series of warehouses.
That's right.
Right, and what that has turned into is adaptive reuse cases that we've not really seen in other parts of the country. So there's you can see it on there. There's a go-kart space.
I wanted to buy that building so bad.
Right.
It came available for sale not that long ago, but it was before I was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just a broker at the time. That guy's going to make off like a bandit.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Guy it's 400 Davidson Street for those. I mean, there's indoor go-karts and airsoft, and
it's huge.
He bought it for nothing
because it's not worth much,
and it's right next to this whole thing.
But it's a brilliant reuse, right? It's
Right.
adaptive reuse without having to spend a lot of money.
That's
We're going to
right.
heat and cool it, but just barely, and we're going to make use of what's sitting there. And then along the rest of it, with the exception of that, by the way, that's the little bit, that little parcel next door to it is the little piece that is riverfront of the PS or the Icahn site.
Yep.
Next to that is Citgo and Shell.
It's funny how much you can tell just from this aerial shot. It's
Yeah.
like, look how dirty and disgusting all of that land
Oh,
is.
if you've ever ridden a bike or walked down Davidson Street, you can smell it in the air.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And anyways, I give Davidson Street a little bit of credit because from an adaptive reuse perspective, these warehouses have been used consistently since I've lived here.
Oh yeah.
And that's great. Rather than just tearing them down and trying to figure it out, like they have been used consistently.
Right. Yeah, it's a good area. I mean, that's for sure. It's really interesting to think, where all of that is going to go. I mean, let's talk about the environmental issues because that's a big deal. For people that don't understand what environmental concerns are. Like, one, how did this site become contaminated? Who allowed that to happen? 2, what does that actually imply? What does it mean?
Yeah. Well, you need a little history lesson. So the Environmental Protection Agency isn't very old. Early 1970s is, I think, the birth of the environmental. In fact, we could look it up.
Yeah.
The EPA, I think, was formalized in the early 1970s and didn't start really legislating until the late 70s, early 80s.
1970.
Look at that. God,
That's crazy.
Every once in a while, I get something right, and it feels so good. And so, that's a really interesting thing, right? Because just because something became a thing, and by the way, let's give a little bit of kudos to Richard Nixon for just a second, right?
For actually deciding to move forward.
Doing something great. Like the EPA is an objectively good organization. Every developer on the planet is going to shake their head no right now because they make life hard.
Well, I mean, look, it's the same thing as sidewalks. I mean, I know that's been overturned in Nashville, but at the end of the day, building sidewalks is a good thing for your property. Does it cost more? Yeah. Come on. But I mean, to put this in perspective for people that are listening, the FDA was founded in 1906. Right? So like that's how long ago people started thinking, you know what, maybe we should care about what's in our food. They didn't care anything about all these crazy factories doing whatever the hell they wanted.
Didn't
matter.
The timeline
We've got a dislike already.
Sorry. The timeline
it's because you were right about the founding.
Right. The timeline between when the Industrial Revolution began and we started doing research into what that legacy would have environmentally was 100 years. 100 years went by before anybody had the temerity to say, hold on a second, that doesn't look good. It doesn't smell good. I'm not going to taste it. Like, there's something wrong. And so, the EPA was born. But that didn't mean it was just like run roughshod through the world. Like, they had to generate and write legislation that could be passed in both houses of Congress and become law. And despite what everybody wants to say, and I see it all the time, the EPA cannot make law. They cannot. They enforce the law. They can help write legislation. And so, by the time that this became the use case of this was in the 1940s or 50s. And so the EPA didn't exist. And so it had been this kind of a thing. And just because something comes into existence doesn't mean that everything else goes away. If that was the case, there would be no check cashing stores in East Nashville.
That's right.
Because they are prohibited on Gallatin Pike. But what do you see when you drive down Gallatin Pike?
They're there.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the ADA. I mean, that wasn't instituted until what, the 90s?
Yeah, I think late 80s, early 90s.
Late 80s, early 90s. I mean, just because something becomes a law, they still have to grandfather everything else in. I mean, that's basically what happened here. So, I mean, after the fact, yes, you can no longer contaminate, but that doesn't mean that it's not contaminated.
That's right.
And those heavy metals, they don't leak. They don't just disappear. They don't evaporate. They're heavy metals.
Well, and it's a story of sort of industrial robber barons too, right? The EPA can say don't do that anymore, and you can keep doing it, and the fines are not significant enough to hurt you. And when they do become significant enough to hurt you, you bankrupt your company, and then it becomes a Superfund site.
That's right.
And so that's how Superfund sites come to be. It's not because somebody couldn't afford to clean it up. It's because they didn't want to.
That's right. And the EPA doesn't want that. Nobody wants that because it's going to be somebody's problem. That's why we have the brownfield programs. That's why we have a lot of protections for these owners and incentives to go out there and actually fix this stuff up. I mean, fortunately, the location for this alone is going to be incentive for somebody at some point to do it no matter what.
Well, and this one's interesting because, being on the Cumberland River, even just that little part, the Army Corps of Engineers will be involved. And the Army Corps of Engineers is actually wildly permissive because they're thinkers. They think about how to solve problems, not just identifying the problem and letting somebody else figure it out. And so I think that there are going to be great opportunities to clean this up and have a lower impact than it might have had otherwise, which is good.
That's right. If you're joining us live, leave us a like, leave us a dislike if you're really not enjoying this conversation, but for some reason you're sticking around. We want to know. Nathan, what does, look, when we were going through all of the Oracle issues, right? I mean, with their approvals and all this, that, and the other, the government decided to invest a significant amount of money into bringing infrastructure and things like that to those sites. What do you anticipate being involved in this site from Metro Nashville's perspective, and what are your expectations on the community, how they're going to feel about it? Because I mean, East Nashville is a very, very vocal bunch.
They are, and to their own detriment. I foresee Metro's involvement being one of creating public spaces and maintaining those public spaces, making that connection to the Greenway, like I said. I think that Metro will put restrictions on height, and that's going to be probably the biggest component that gets argued here is how tall something can be because, like we said, 40 acres, it's got to be vertical. The cost of it is just too much. And so that's going to be one. Which is going to require a rezone that maybe doesn't exist. And that's going to be interesting. So do we need to rewrite legislation on how that happens? I know you're an urbanist. I think that This is a great opportunity for the movement that has been slow burning in Nashville for a long time to eliminate zoning categories in the urban core. And that's an interesting idea. I'm not going to say it's without its faults, but overall I think it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, nothing's going to be perfect in all scenarios.
That's right.
That's the problem with blanket zoning anything.
Yeah.
Is that there's going to be a bunch of outliers that don't make sense.
And East Nashville's not going to like it. I mean, they're going to, well, that's not true. East Nashville's going to love it, but they are going to have, they're going to be public hearings. Those public hearings are going to be centered around what Metro is paying for here, and the answer is zero. Like, Metro will not pay a dime to do any of this. And then there's going to be disagreement about whether people can get rich building and developing on this site, and it's a non-starter because somebody with deep pockets buys this. They can, and if they can get the zoning across the finish line, they can do whatever they want. And so I think that, while it matters, and we need public opinion, and it's going to be crucial, by the way, that you provide public opinion when this starts. Ultimately, that public opinion has to be constructive for the new owner to take it seriously. Right. And we've learned that lesson in East Nashville a lot, where people
way too many times.
Yeah, just complain until a developer says, "I don't care anymore."
I mean, we saw that happen over off of
Riverside Village.
Yeah, Riverside Village. That's what. Yeah, because the developer came in. I mean, for those of y'all that don't know this story, but they bought that parcel right on the corner of Riverside. What was it Vinyl Tap that was there? Who was the
Vinyl Tap? No, not Vinyl Tap. Oh my god!
There was a very popular record shop
store,
that was on the corner, and the developer wanted to do multifamily.
Yeah.
And by right, on the site they could only do so much, and the neighborhood wanted them to preserve the retail that was existing. So the developers,
shitty too.
It was wasn't that great?
Even the owner of the store was like, "No, we don't want to be here.
Like, build something new, and then put us back in there. Like, please build us something new, actually." And so the developer came back to the neighborhood and said, "Hey, we've got to get a variance on the back of the property for extended height in order for us to justify saving this piece in the front and not building on top of it."
Yeah.
And the neighborhood said, "Absolutely not. We won't give you a variance for anything." And it was the most confused I've ever been in a neighborhood meeting.
I've never sat through something so embarrassed to be both a member of the community that they were talking about and a member of the development community.
Oh my gosh.
It was just like, it was the least productive thing. And ultimately the developer, I was kind of proud of them because they said, "You know what? You guys aren't giving us we're telling you we want to work with you. We want to help you. We want to do something nice here. And all you're telling us is to get fucked."
Yeah.
And you know what?
That's putting it lightly.
Right. And so we own this thing. We can do this by right. I don't even have to call the council person.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do. And that's what they did. And honestly, it looks great.
Nice.
It looks great.
It's a good development.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what that area needed.
Yep. Agreed.
I mean, the multifamily would have been better. It's much more needed.
The parking behind is good.
It's great. It hides it.
Yep.
You don't have to see cars. I mean, I hate cars.
Yeah.
You don't have to see cars. Yeah, they ended up tearing it down, and instead of building back the multifamily with ground floor retail, which is like every urbanist dream, right? It's just mixed use, give people a reason to be there at all times of the day. Yeah. They came back with just the retail because that's what made sense for them.
Yeah.
So it's too bad. I mean, let's talk about just engaging with the community. How I mean, one, because I'm sure there's going to be some politicians here in Nashville that are going to listen to this, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure that there's going to be some neighborhood folks.
Is that true?
They're going to
listen. Any of them listening?
Well, if they are, we got to take a step back.
Right.
What are your recommendations for them and the neighborhood constituents as they're going through this?
Don't get greedy. I think that we're learning that the hard way across Nashville, which is we can impose the will of the people on developers without being greedy about it. And we should hold people that buy properties like this to a higher standard. I agree with that. And I might be the only developer in the city that would say that out loud. I think that you should hold them.
That.
Okay. you should be held to a higher standard when you are dealing with something that's so critical to the future. This site will still be important long after we're dead. And
that's right.
Because of that, it's a legacy project, like you said at the beginning of this, and we have to treat it well. And so the politicians that are listening to this, that's city council people, right?
That's right.
The state, they're not going to listen to me, but the city council will. And I think, by the way, this site has a really great new councilman And then, has the support of the former councilman, Brett Withers, the adjacent council people, Emily Benedict, Sean Parker. And so you've got a litany of real, and down and across the river, Jacob Cupin.
Yeah.
These are people that are committed to the redevelopment in a smart way of, by the way, Clay is the name of the council person down there, are committed in a smart way to the redevelopment of these spaces along the river. And what they have to do is not get greedy. So don't ask for something that is going to be a no. We went down and we did a project in Pensacola, Florida, and we were ready to go to war because we are so familiar with the Nashville development process of getting into a city and having to do argue back and forth about who's going to build what and where and how it's going to benefit the city and whatnot. And we got there, and the city, first of all, their offices look at the ocean, so not so bad. But they were so helpful, so kind. They said, "What do you need from us?" And it was the first time I've heard a city behave that way. And that's the kind of attitude that somebody should have when they're doing this, because the politicians have to acknowledge that the person spending the big bucks on this is inheriting an environmental nightmare. And they're going to spend an unknown amount of money cleaning that site up. It's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars probably. And you have to be sensitive to that and remember that because they're doing it, you don't have to.
That's right.
And you get credit for that. And so that person, you can hate them. It could be the worst human being on the planet. But if they're going to clean that site up, give them a round of applause, because that's a good thing to do.
I mean, that alone, with the potential for all of that in a flood to leach into our rivers and then get in everybody's drinking water. I mean, there's
happened already.
Yeah.
2010, that's what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, where do you think all of that went?
Right.
It went somewhere.
Downstream.
That's exactly right. We've got a question from Kyle. I think this is a pretty interesting one. Could they connect to the 155 with a bridge, creating a town center to bring in more businesses? Long-term plan, of course. What are your thoughts on that?
The 150, isn't Briley Parkway 155?
I have no idea. I actually was thinking about that. I was like, wait, which one is the 155?
Briley was 155. Yeah, SR 155 is up there.
It's Briley.
Yeah.
Maybe they mean 24.
Could they connect to the?
Or maybe it's the Korean Veterans Memorial Bridge.
Hold on, let me read the question. Could they connect to the 155 with a bridge, creating a town center to bring in more business? Long-term plan, of course. I mean, the answer, even without knowing if that's the right piece of roadway or not, is yes, you could theoretically connect to this bridge to 24. And I think that then involves the state, and it starts getting a little tricky. I think right now the city and the state are working really hard to eliminate exits off of 24. And reimagine how people get on and off that stretch of freeway. Korean Vets is not going to change. It might get bigger, which would be kind of interesting. And, on the other side of John Siegenthaler, there's going to be an additional pedestrian, or on the other side of Woodland, there will be an additional pedestrian bridge that Oracle will build. And so that will be really interesting. Other side of Jefferson.
It's up here.
So that's going to be an interesting one. There's a decent chance that they are required to build significant infrastructure on this. But
100%,
keep in mind, the owner of the property may not ultimately be the one that develops it. And
that's
so
right. They can master plan it.
That's right. And there is a chance, by the way, that much of this happens in a ground lease.
Right.
And so that's going to be interesting. Yeah.
It'll be, because Nashville hasn't historically had to do a lot of that because people just
Titan Stadium
buy
is
it.
the best example I can think of, but that's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I would love personally to see another pedestrian bridge somewhere over here. I mean, does it make sense for it to be right here with it being so close to Korean Veteran? I mean, look, I would love pedestrian bridges every.
Well, so you've got one in
100 yards.
Shelby Bottoms,
That's
and that pedestrian bridge is great, but you can't access it other than
But
being
it's far. I mean, that's the thing. Like, if you look how far it is,
that's not the one. It's further down.
it's further down.
Yeah, it's
Oh, that's the train.
that's the train. Yeah. So
yeah, it's all the way
there
up
it
here.
is.
There
Yep.
it is. Yeah, crossing into two rivers.
um,
Yeah, I mean, I think, Kyle's saying he was looking further to the east. That makes sense.
but I think that there's opportunities to connect. This is so interesting because 24, 40, and 65 are, and Briley to some degree, but those three roads they have a stranglehold on downtown. They were so poorly thought.
Oh my gosh!
And the way that people enter and exit those roadways are just, there isn't a time of day in Nashville that one of those roadways isn't totally clogged. And so this is an opportunity to help the state rethink how these things, because these are interstate roads. So Nashville has very little say in what happens to them, but it is a great opportunity for the state to come in and say, we're tired of Nashville bitching to us about roads. We'll give you your TDEC certification, because TDEC is who's going to sign off on the Tennessee version of the EPA if you make X changes to these roadways.
Selfishly, what I'd love to see, and I think that this is probably more approachable than just general light rail. Like, let's get a trolley system going and let's have it hub out of here. Well, I think if you had a trolley, it's funny, bringing back trolley barns, considering Pinewoods across the street, and that's where historically they were. But if you had something like that here on site that went all the way down Shelby Avenue, oh my gosh, maybe even cut over to Gallatin, you've got stuff that goes downtown, maybe even something going to the airport.
Well, part of the Nissan Stadium deal is to bring a new transit hub.
Yeah, but it's mostly bus rapid transit.
I think that's okay. I think as I listen, I love the idea of rail travel in Nashville. I think that it's a great idea. I think it will be hard pressed for Nashville to agree to it in large scale off the bat, which is why the mayor's plan is a good one. Which
I think trolleys is easy though. Like, come on, that's so localized.
Still requires infrastructure, and so the nice thing about bus rapid transit is the infrastructure changes are so minimal, and by having that transit hub here in East, we can do what you're talking about with dedicated lanes for bus travel. I think that it's a good start. I agree. Darren, you're right. Light rail, absolutely. No more buses. Here's the thing. I think that Darren would think that the buses are okay if they're isolated to their own lane. I might be wrong.
Oh, yeah. Well, then they effectively are what a light rail would be.
That's right.
But
it's easier to fix. You don't have special machinery. If a bus breaks down, it's easy to move off of the roadway and put another one in service. There's a lot to like about bus rapid transit. It is not the best way.
The problem is we've half-assed it. We've always half-assed it, and you can't do that. That's
how it starts. Like, that's the thing. And if you're a Nashvilleian, vote please. November 5th is voting day. If you haven't registered to vote, I think you've got another day. But we're going to vote on our transit plan, and it isn't perfect. In fact, it's far from perfect.
It will never be perfect.
No, but this is how you get started. Minneapolis. I grew up in Minneapolis, and in Minneapolis when I was a kid, there was zero light rail, zero, and getting around was a nightmare. And it cost $1 billion in the 80s if you wanted to install a light rail line. And then in the 90s, they brought it up again, and it was $10 billion. And finally, in the 2000s, Minneapolis is like, okay, for the low price of $30 billion, we will install a light rail line. And it's been transformative to Minneapolis. Same thing in Seattle. I lived in Seattle in the early 90s. There was nothing other than buses. And it wasn't bus rapid transit. It was just buses.
Keep talking.
Yep. And the interesting thing about that, I'm just going to talk to an empty room now. The interesting thing about that was that when I left Seattle, you still had to get around by car or bus. And it was hard. And when I came back to visit a friend, you don't need to own a car in Seattle anymore, which is amazing. It's maybe the most amazing transformation of a public transit system I've ever seen in a pretty short amount of time. This is an interesting side story while you're looking for whatever you're looking for. When the night that I moved to Seattle, which was in the winter of 1990, we showed up. We landed at SeaTac Airport, and we were going to go to our little house, which was in Bellevue, that we were renting. And that night, the bridge over I-90, or the bridge over Lake Washington, which was I-90, collapsed into the lake.
What? Because
it was on pontoons. Their transit system was so broken, the bridge sank like overnight. Nothing hit it. Someone this is what did it in. Someone left a door open.
What?
Someone left a door open, and the pontoons flooded, and the bridge collapsed into the lake. Look it up. It's hysterical.
Well, the reason I was jumping up is to go grab my copy of Walkable City Rules by Jeff Speck. Phenomenal book if you've never read it before. But the first rule on selling walkability on wealth talks about how much does your commute cost or save society. If driving costs you $1, right, which gas is like $3-4 a gallon, and then you're also spending 30, 40, 50, I mean, today, probably $80,000 on a new vehicle, which is just absolutely insane. Mm-hmm. If driving costs you $1, society pays $9.20. So for every dollar you spend on your vehicle, on driving, on commuting anywhere, the United States pays 9.2 times that just so that you can move your car.
Yeah, that's silly.
If you pay $1 to ride the bus, society pays $1.50. It is like buses are a quarter of the cost that we spend every year on just maintaining roadways and highways and whatever so that people can take their single person vehicle to and from work.
Most of the complaints around buses are that buses block lanes of traffic.
They should. They hold 100 people.
I disagree with that.
People or 100 cars.
We can have both. Like it doesn't. Yeah. That's the interesting thing. We can have both. I love this. This, by the way, with so many looking for green energy, why not add green roofed condos with light rail, include park? So I think that whatever happens here absolutely will include more parks.
Yeah.
It may include some stages and performance, but
that actually leads me to my last question, which I think that's a perfect lead in.
Yeah.
If you were developing this property, what would you like? What are your non-negotiables? We're going to do this. What would you be aiming for? What would you want to have?
I'd want to get rich and retire. No, I think
right, no money involved. You don't have to raise capital, but you're also not going to make money. What's your legacy?
I think that I'd want something that is beautiful, that puts Nashville on the map architecturally, and not just physical, like building architecture. I mean, civil architecture. I mean, utility architecture. All of these things. I think that this is such a great opportunity to reimagine what a riverfront can look like and how people can live, work, walk, play, eat. In theory, you could build something here that benefited all the communities around it, benefited the waterfront. Think about a water taxi site here that people could access to go up and down the Cumberland River. Now you've done something, which, by the way, this is a word I hate in development, but I'm going to use it right now. You've now activated the entirety of the Cumberland from start to finish. There are water taxi sites along the Cumberland River, but they're trash. And so if you have a centralized site, I was in London this summer. It's a little humble brag, I guess. And because we went to Taylor Swift, so it's a real humble brag.
You're so cool.
But there's an Uber boat. Literally, there's an Uber boat. You get on the boat.
You call it on your phone?
Kind of. It's like a giant water taxi, but Uber runs it. And so it runs up and down the river. It's fast. It's efficient. And so we can have that here. And so whatever gets built here should benefit the public good by providing spaces people want to linger in. So parks, that park setting that we talked about, a place to feed yourself when you're there. I don't think there should be a stitch of parking down here. Not a single parking space. I think it should be green or vertical.
I'd love to see it $100 an hour to park a car downtown.
But I think it should be so easy to get here that nobody can complain about it.
Yeah.
So the bus drops you off and you step off and there's someone sitting there with a soft serve cone for you. That simple, right? And that's a daydream, but you asked me to daydream. I think that would be really great that nobody could complain about not being able to park here. Put the parking lot someplace else. Park and ride it. I don't care. But do not put it in downtown. Don't put it adjacent to the river. It causes more environmental concerns. It's bad news. We're next to all these great parks. Activate those parks more. Ascend Amphitheater starts. By the way, this benefits Ascend in a big way because there's been a lot of noise complaints about Ascend, which I think is nonsense. But
it's ridiculous.
It does, in fact, have the ability now, if you go vertical, just block some of that sound. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a great opportunity along the Cumberland.
Yeah, I mean, it's likely going to have at least DTC zoning, I would think. And that has no parking requirements in Nashville, which is great. I mean, if you think about, just to put it in perspective for those of you all that have never developed a piece of property before that has vertical parking, it's over $100,000 per parking space to build a parking garage. So if you think about how many cars you're going to have to park on this 45-acre site to justify the verticality of it, we're talking thousands of parking spaces. So that's hundreds of millions of dollars, at least tens of millions of dollars.
It provides no public benefit.
It does no benefit.
None.
Just so you can park your car every now and then.
And it has to be maintained. You know, if this is developed in such a way that it becomes a green space for people, if you do it correctly, it will maintain itself.
That's right.
And so, like, we have a great opportunity here to really, I lived in another place. I lived in Boise, Idaho for a minute. And Boise is beautiful largely because they embraced their waterfront. Boise's waterfront is second to like none. It's awesome. You can get on an inner tube, float down the whole of the Boise River, hop off, walk up to a pub, like just enjoy it. It's outstanding for what, like it's not a little town anymore, but it's still a little city and it does a terrific job.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jamie is saying connect the rail from Mount Juliet downtown to West Tennessee, literally merge East and West Tennessee by rail. That'd be awesome.
That's on the list already. I don't know if you know this, Jamie, but Amtrak has been in discussions with the state for the last 5 years, and I think we're finally getting to a place where there's likely to be a new Amtrak rail line that actually runs the direction you're not, the opposite direction of what you're talking about, but from here to Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so if that can prove to be a successful transit section, they'll extend it out west. I have no doubt about it.
If we had a rail that went to Atlanta, I'd probably go there every other week.
Oh, for sure.
Like, why not? You can work on the train or sleep the whole way. Who cares? That's so easy.
I lived in D.C. You'd jump on the train. You'd grab your computer. You'd work for an hour and a half. You're in New York.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Like, that's a great commute.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mind
No
that.
security. Like, I mean, which is sort of silly. I shouldn't have said that out loud. Like, but like you literally just walk onto the train and it's just comfortable.
Yeah, it's easy. Kyle is saying, create a place where community wants to be a part of and happy to live. No parking, rails, bikes, green energy, etc. Small businesses, shops, live music, and a place to live. Can't get wrong. I completely agree with that.
Nothing to say about that.
Nathan, thanks for joining me, man, and diving into this Icahn
Excited
property.
about it.
I thought about putting together like a super lame play on words and calling it Nashville's most iconic property.
Oh, I'm so glad you didn't do that.
Are you sure? It seems like a dad joke.
This
that you would
isn't smart
appreciate.
list. We're not going bye. like it's not going to happen. I think it's such an exciting piece of property, and I'll be like many of you. I'll be really anxious to see what happens. I don't want to get everybody's hopes up. There's a relatively good chance it doesn't sell.
Yeah,
and that's going to be disappointing, but we'll see.
but it's exciting that it's an option.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you are listening on the podcast, leave us a review. I want to know what you like. We'll see you guys in the next one. Are you looking to take the next step toward investing in commercial real estate but don't know where to go? CRE Central offers a comprehensive education and coaching platform designed to help you get started. Our online courses cover a wide range of topics, from the fundamentals to advanced strategies, ensuring you have the knowledge and skills needed to thrive in this competitive industry. As a member, you'll gain access to our exclusive online community and monthly group coaching calls, providing you with valuable networking opportunities and personalized guidance from experienced professionals. Whether you're a beginner or looking to take your career to the next level, CRE Central has the resources you need. Visit www.crecentral.com to learn more.